Greetings, film fans, and welcome to another episode of the following feature podcast. I'm your host, Arthur Wilde, and I'm here every single week to give you a breakdown of all the latest film news and gossip. Plus, I try to review at least 3 films a week, which I feel are maybe worth a view. Sometimes, I'm talking about them specifically because they're definitely not worth a view, but that in itself becomes a talking point, so here we are. This week, there isn't really any kind of theme to the films. To be honest, I wasn't really thinking about what films I was going to do, but once I realised that Borat was coming out, obviously it's what everyone's talking about. It's the hot topic, so that's obviously going to be one of the films that we review. We also look at, what's the other ones we do? We do Juliet Naked, which is a film based on a Nick Hornby book, which is always fun. And we also look at an independent film from England, Blue Story, which talks about rival London gangs and the futility of this gang warfare and what it does to communities and to families. So 3 really good films there to review. 3 films that I enjoyed all of. So, I'm not going with a negative review here. I'm not going to go down one of these kind of like, God, how shit was the New Mutants. As fun as that was, this is a different episode for a different time. So, here we are. Not really much to report personally. I'm definitely not working on that movie that I was talking about for so long. I was so excited about that. And to be honest, it was something that I've been looking forward to for most of the year. But unfortunately, due to, arrangements, circumstances regarding the whole pandemic, I haven't been as needed as I expected. And due to that, I've become attached to other projects, which means that when the film did finally come around to kind of asking if I could be there, I was unfortunately had to turn them down because, it's a weird situation at the moment, and it's a juggling act for anyone that's working in the arts sector. And a lot of people will be able to understand and be able to empathise with that because they're going through the same thing. One of the reasons why I started this podcast was that I didn't really see my creative outlet being something that I'd be able to indulge in again this year. I've actually been quite lucky with some of the work that I've gotten. But unfortunately, things aren't still great. So looking forward to a post-vaccine world where we could just get on with our lives and do what we need to do. But you know what? Whilst it is, extremely stressful, and it's a period just beset with anxiety and, loneliness, and it's a very, very difficult time for everyone to go through. But really, I'm trying not to get too, depressed about it. It's a year that we just got to write off. And once we have the vaccine, once we're, we can move on and leave this whole COVID thing behind us, then, we'll be able to get back to where we were. We'll be able to recover. For some people, it's not going to be as easy as others. And without the help of the government, it looks like it's going to be very, very difficult for a lot of people to actually get back on their feet, including, and most especially, well, from my point of view, people in the arts sector. There's a lot of funding which is just not being granted to those that will not survive this pandemic without it. And I'm talking about like sort of small independent cinemas and theatres, small like sort of artistic groups like dance groups and amateur dramatics groups, things that really do rely on a lot of volunteers and the favoured use of space. And there's a lot of things going on in this country at the moment where the arts have supported people through these very hard times, whilst not being able to go to work or see friends or family. We've relied quite heavily on media and entertainment. We've relied on movies and TV shows to kind of stave off the boredom. We've relied on music to keep us entertained and keep our spirits up. And we've relied on books and comics and all sorts that have occupied our minds and given us something to focus on. And, it's a multi-billion-pound empire in this country, especially the film the film industry. And, the government doesn't really see the need to support it. But at the moment, they're struggling to actually feed kids. So I can't really say that it's shocking that they would let independent theatrical groups fall through the cracks, so to speak. So it's a terrible time, and I'm trying to stay as positive as I can, and I'm trying to make sure that I show as much gratitude as possible with the work that I'm getting, because I'm nothing special in this industry, and I haven't been in it for very long. So I'm having to appreciate the fact that the jobs coming my way are jobs that a lot of other people would walk over my dead body to get to. So I'm really grateful that I've actually had the opportunities that I've had and continue to have. But it's involved some really tedious experiences and regarding going for tests in weird, obscure places at terrible times, over vast distances. But we're doing what we can to actually make sure that we can still work in the arts industry. And not only that, that we're still providing people with the entertainment and, the stimulus they need to kind of stay sane during all this crazy times. I've worked quite a lot on a soap opera in this country, and I found a lot of people were actually contacting me when the episodes ran out, as to when they should be expecting the show to come back on TV. I'm an extra. I'm background, so a lot of times I don't even know what's actually happening in the show that I'm in. People ask me like, sort of, what's going on? I noticed that you're in that episode with so and so. Does that mean that they're kind of, that's their storyline's going to be resolved soon? And I'm like, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I don't even watch the show. But I know a lot of people are missing their entertainment, and a lot of people have been really indulging in a lot of viewings that they didn't have time for before the pandemic. So yeah, hopefully everything can get back to normal, but unfortunately it's going to be a long time for the arts in this country to recover, due to the fact that we're really not seeing the support from the government. But then, as I say, they can't feed starving kids, so they're not really going to feed starving actors. It's just something we're going to have to live with until we can get a better government in. I can't really see that happening either, so c'est la vie. What are you going to do? Let's move on from all this. It's all a bit kind of stressful and a bit serious to begin with the podcast. So let's just dive straight into some movie news, shall we? Yeah. Okay, and the first thing we're going to talk about is Bond. Now, unfortunately, this isn't some kind of good news where it's like, oh, it's going to be on BBC One this Friday. No, unfortunately, it's still being pushed back to April 2021. But it's now been revealed that, well, at least there are rumours going around that the studio explored the $600 million sale of the film to streaming services before moving the release date to April 2021. Now, why? Why would they do this? Well, they wanted to get the film released. They wanted to get it out there. And with the cinemas reopening briefly, films like Tenet and Unhinged and New Mutants came out and made fuck all, actually. Really, really, really tiny amounts of money in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you're looking at a film like Tenet, which should have made an easy $1 billion over the summer, with it being such a huge blockbuster hit. In this country, I think it's made over 100 million, but worldwide, it's really not doing very well. And it's not that the film is a flop. It's just that with the restricted amount of cinemas still open, and the amount of cinemas that were open at the time, that was one of the first films that came out, and people were very, very tentative about actually getting back into the cinema, a place where they'll be stuck in a small, confined room with hundreds of people for several hours. Or in the case of Tenet, it was 2.5 hours. And that became a problem. It was something that was a big deterrent for people, especially when they saw countries like China that were banning all films being released that were over 2 hours long. With those kind of restrictions not being put in place in this country, people were starting to believe that maybe the country was trying to rush people back too quickly and put them at risk. So whilst a lot of us were very eager to get back to the cinema, for many it just wasn't seen, it wasn't deemed a very safe option, especially in regards to bringing your family along. No one really wants to risk that, especially if they can't guarantee the safety of like elderly parents or like vulnerable children. It's a weird situation. So yeah, the Bond producers were looking at the possibility of selling it online, because rather than take a hit at the cinema and lose a lot of money, when someone like Netflix comes in and says, we'll buy that film off you for $600 million, at least you're guaranteed a return on your money. But whilst that might have worked for some films, like for example, the Tom Hanks film Greyhound, which was supposed to be a huge cinema release over summer as well. As you know, as reviewed on this show, that was actually released exclusively by Apple TV. And there's been various others like that as well. Disney Plus, as we spoke about last week, released their big summer film Mulan directly onto their streaming service. Admittedly, at a premium access price, which did put a lot of people off, but they did manage to recoup more money online than they would have been able to do at the cinema, based on the ratings of other films that have been released at that time. Now, they haven't made a lot of money, and it hasn't really done the film's popularity any good, because it's quite a small niche audience that are watching it. First of all, you've got to be an Apple Plus subscriber, or Apple TV subscriber, or whatever it's called. And then you've got to pay the additional, I think it's about 25 quid to actually get the film. And, for families, it's understandable that would be a lot cheaper than taking the whole family to the cinema with all the treats and everything that are included, as well as the ticket price. But it was just one of those things with a lot of people releasing a lot of stuff for free, or like within existing membership structures. It didn't seem very attractive to a lot of people that had the service for them to actually shell out an additional amount of money. And yes, as I say, again, it did work out better in the long term. But it was just, it created that kind of psychological barrier for people, where they just felt uncomfortable with paying an additional amount on a service that they were already paying for. You got to remember, a lot of families, to placate their children over the pandemic, have signed up to more streaming services than they originally had. Subscriptions for Netflix and Amazon Prime did go through the roof during the pandemic. But we'll see. Bond is not coming out online, unfortunately, and I'm kind of glad about that as well. I don't mind waiting until April to see the new Bond film, because I don't really have high expectations for it. I think Sam Mendes was probably the best thing that happened to the Bond films for a very long time, but even saying that, Spectre wasn't fantastic. It kind of hit the mark on some points, but was quite wide of the mark a few times. So, yeah. But what they're going to do with it on this final installment for Daniel Craig's Bond, we'll still wait to be seen. But, we're going to have to wait until April, and we're going to see it at the cinema. Hopefully in a post-pandemic world, or at least a post-vaccine world. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, some good news. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Last Black Man in San Francisco both picked up awards recently. Now, I know you're thinking it's something like the Oscars or the BAFTAs, right? Close. But it was actually the 7th Annual Location Managers Guild International Awards, live from YouTube. Yeah, so not very prestigious. Tarantino's movie was lucky enough to win the prestigious award for Outstanding Locations in a Period Film, whilst Joe Talbot's effort took home the much-coveted Outstanding Locations in a Contemporary Film award. Now, I didn't even know these were a thing, and I really doubt Tarantino was there to pick up the award, but with films, as well as with real estate, sometimes it does come down to location. I've only seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I do need to check out The Last Black Man in San Francisco, because I've heard some good things about it. But with Tarantino's film, we did find some very interesting locations. I mean, it was supposed to be depicting a part of San Francisco that... was it San Francisco? No, sorry. It's Hollywood. Wrong film. But there's parts of LA that haven't changed in 50 years. So they were able to film on location. And the ability to find those locations, because it's one thing about finding a building which fits the period that you're filming into, but if behind it is a brand new contemporary, they can work around that quite a lot. But I believe with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they wanted to use as little green screen as possible. So a lot of the locations were as they are today, and that was really did add to the realism of the film. I mean, there was no point in that where you felt like you were watching a modern film set in the 50s. It looked very much like it was a 50s film. Everything was right about the fashion, the cars, the aesthetic. It was just all there. And whilst I've never heard of these location awards, I have been, obviously I've worked in film and TV for quite a while, and I've been to some incredible locations. I know I've done a lot of, I've done some Victorian stuff. There's an old stately home in Luton called the Luton Hoo. I believe it's actually a hotel these days. But on the back of this hotel, on the land, there is an old, I don't know, it's like part of a small village, a couple of streets and houses, which are from that period that haven't been touched in over 100 years. And they make an absolute perfect location, but it's kind of spooky when you're walking down there. I mean, you got to imagine, my first time on location there, I was in full Victorian costume, with the soot on my face and everything, and when you step out and there's horses going past and everyone's in costume, everyone's kind of doing their thing and hustle and bustle and making it seem real. There is a moment when you look around and you think to yourself, I could have just literally been transported back in time and I wouldn't know the difference. There's nothing about it that really says to you, well, obviously this is fake. The sets are incredible. And, yes, sets can be made to look extremely realistic. I actually had to prove to someone on the set of the soap opera that it was actually a fake set. And they didn't believe me, and I just ran up to one of the houses and wobbled the entire wall, which, you should have seen the look on their face, just to kind of destroy their understanding of what's real and what's not. I think it took them most of the day to recover from that. But, I understand that locations, getting a good location for your film is huge. So, but I mean, did anyone else know that these were awards? I'd love to see what the ceremony's like. I would love to see where they held the ceremony. Obviously, it was broadcast on YouTube, but this is the 7th annual one. So if I was invited to this thing and it turned out to be a 2-star hotel off a motorway near the services, I'd be very disappointed. The irony would just be unbearable. Anyway, on to more news. Michael B. Jordan looks like he's going to be directing Creed 3. The actor, who for many years has worked under the director Ryan Coogler, will be taking his place for the 3rd installment of the popular boxing franchise. Jordan, who worked with he worked on pretty much all of Coogler's films, including Fruitvale Station, which we reviewed on the show, Black Panther, as well as the first 2 Creed movies, is looking to make more moves behind the camera after it was announced that he will be producing the new Static Shock live-action movie. Now, if you're not aware, Static Shock is a popular DC character who was a huge hit in 2000 when his animated show proved very popular. It's one of the only, or at least very few superhero shows that starring a black character. So this is 20 years ago. This is before we had the likes of Black Panther on screen. Static Shock had a short run. I think it was 4 seasons on the Cartoon Network, or no, was it Nickelodeon? Anyway, it was a hugely popular show, and it is returning in a kind of digital format. But DC Comics have been very keen to do something more with the character that has such a huge fan base. So they're looking to make a live-action film, which Michael B. Jordan is at the moment only set to executively produce, which basically means he's part of the company that's funding and helping put the whole thing together. Now, whether he'll actually have a part in the film remains to be seen. He definitely won't be playing the title character because I believe he's 14 years old. But it's a great opportunity. So, and I'm sure he's looking to do what he can to make sure that this opportunity goes to the right person, and that it is something that can have the same kind of success as Black Panther has had, in regards to like having representation in cinema. So yeah, very much excited about that. But I'm more excited about Creed 3, to be honest, because the first two films were very good. I really enjoyed the because they're basically a spin-off from the Rocky series. And every time we thought we'd seen enough of Rocky, they'd announce another one. And as much as we'd kind of roll our eyes and bemoan the obviousness of what they were going to do with it, we'd still turn up and watch them. I mean, that's how he managed to get 5 or 6 of those fucking things. Was it 6? How many of those? Anyway, yeah, no word if Stallone's going to be in it or not. I think he might be. Did he die in the second one? He didn't die, did he? Did he die? You know, I don't really remember that movie too well. I just remember it being like the return of Dolph Lundgren. If he dies, he dies. Yeah. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one, because Michael B. Jordan is a hot property at the moment, and he doesn't seem to be involved in much that sucks. So maybe that is something worth getting excited about. We will have to wait and see. My final bit of news, something that caught my eye because it didn't interest me at first, but you ever catch like a glimpse of a headline and you're like, yeah, whatever, and then you leave it alone, but you come back and you're like, wait, what did that say? Well, Ben Wheatley, who for me is one of the best directors in the UK right now, absolutely, he's got this edgy kind of like weirdness to him, and he's the acclaimed director of such dark and edgy hits as High Rise, Free Fire, and current Netflix top 10 horror remake Rebecca. And he's actually going to team up with Jason Statham for The Meg 2. Yes, they're making a sequel to what I lovingly refer to as Bigger Jaws. Wheatley, who's been rumoured to be working on the follow-up to 2018's Tomb Raider reboot, looks now to be satisfying his blockbuster craving with a big CGI fish, which we can only, hope receives an underwater roundhouse kick from Statham. I don't know. I haven't seen the first one yet. That's my problem with this. I thought the first one had such terrible reviews and was such a waste of time that it would just get swept under the carpet and no one ever talk about it again. But it has picked up quite a cult fan base. It's one of those, I mean, it's certainly not Jaws. But it's certainly not Sharknado either. So I guess there was a nice middle ground there where it's found its audience and there's enough of them that a sequel will be worthwhile. But to put it in the hands of Ben Wheatley is something that it's just a little bit weird. I mean, it's just, it doesn't seem like it's his area. It's not his genre. So for that reason, I'm really looking forward to it. Like, I'm going to go and watch, I might watch The Meg tonight, just so I can get an idea of, what Bigger Jaws is all about. Because I will definitely watch the sequel. I'm excited about that. This guy has such a weird way with creating quite, slimy characters. People who just have no real, what's the word I'm looking for? They're beyond reproach. They're just the worst kind of people. And even though they can be like the protagonist of a film, you do find yourself thinking to yourself, like, if they die, they die. Oh, maybe I do have something in common with Dolph Lundgren. Anyway, I absolutely fucking love Free Fire. And you know what? The more I think about it right now, the more that's going to be reviewed next week. Okay, so don't be surprised if next week I'm talking about The Meg and Free Fire. I also need to watch the Chicago 7 film as well. I just felt like I'd had enough Sacha Baron Cohen this week, but I do need to watch that. So, good God. Yeah, lots of films to watch. But Ben Wheatley has such a... Have you ever seen films like Kill List and things like that? You know that his films are not they're not the most happiest, brightest films to watch. They're usually very bleak, depicting some quite horrible encounters with some quite terrible people. So, yeah, I've got no idea what he's going to bring to the Meg franchise, except to say that it's going to be definitely worth a watch. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one as it develops. I mean, as I say, he was supposed to be doing the follow-up to Tomb Raider. Why, I don't know. I think he's just looking to kind of do a good cinema film, which, you know, I don't know what he's trying to achieve. I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. I guess there's just a part of him that just wants to give it a go and wants to just, you know, be unpredictable and try to mix things up a little bit. I haven't seen Rebecca yet. I know that's a remake of a Hitchcock film, and it's proving quite popular on Netflix at the moment. So maybe that makes the list for next week. I don't know. But, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. And if it does happen, yes, I will be going to see it. Absolutely, 100%. But for now, that's it for the movie news for this week. So let's move on to some film reviews. And we're kicking off quite predictably with Borat's subsequent movie film, which is the sequel that we didn't know we wanted and didn't know we were getting. Having seemingly brought huge shame to Kazakhstan, we find our hero at a labour camp where he is serving a life sentence. One day, the government send for him and he is given an opportunity to redeem himself. Having seen the new US president align himself with all of the world's most deplorable leaders, Borat is tasked with gifting the President Trump with a famous monkey porn star in return for talks with the glorious leader of Kazakhstan. But things don't go according to plan, and he must instead groom his daughter to be the ultimate present to sweeten relations between the two nations. All seems to be going to plan until a deadly virus causes Borat to shack up with two conspiracy theorists, whilst devising a plan that prevents his government from executing him in a most ridiculous way that his new American friends find believable and concerning enough to join forces with him to carry out his mission. Now, I wrote that. That's my little synopsis of the film. But even reading it back, I'm like, was it really that fucking ridiculous? Yes, it fucking was. It was absolutely... I mean, if you've seen the first Borat film, you know kind of what to expect from this. But still, it catches you off guard. Because what happens in this film? What happened in the first film? We thought we were going to get a series of sketches. We were so used to Sacha Baron Cohen doing all his different characters and stuff. In this country especially, we grew up with him being on TV. You know, he did Ali G, and he did a bunch of other characters as well that were all, you know, really great at taking the piss. But they always had some kind of significant, either sociological or political stance that wasn't really revealed until you got to the end of it and you're able to take the whole thing in. You're like, you know what? I should vote Labour. It's one of those weird kind of... I'm not saying that that's what the films or Ali G was suggesting. I'm just saying, like, sometimes it kind of... You think you're watching a silly thing about a rude boy trying to, you know, embarrass himself in front of some political leaders. But then after a while, you're like, maybe there are parts of socialism that we can introduce in this country to make it a better place to live in for all of us. Okay, it's one of those. It kind of takes you off guard. And what was lovely about the first Borat film, unexpectedly, it had a plot. That was the first thing that I did not see coming. It had a plot, and it had a good plot as well. A plot that was clever enough to carry the story forward whilst introducing all these elements that allow him to have these seemingly sketch-like encounters with people, but with this disarming charm of the Borat character, who is able to, you know, allow people to, you know, show their true colours and really come out as the people they really are. And it caused a lot of controversy and a lot of legal action afterwards as well, especially from Kazakhstan, who felt massively insulted. and with one thing as well, it had a certain sweetness to it and a certain charm where, whilst he was just being silly and putting himself out for ridicule, it kind of showed this warmth and heart to the innocence of Borat. And how even someone as ridiculous as that, when exposed to like the harsh truths of bigotry and misogyny and all these kind of different class related horrors that are currently rife in the world and everywhere you look, it really kind of showed he was able to show it in a light or through the eyes of someone that is a bit too naive to really appreciate how deep these problems actually run through our countries. So it really did work, and it was a huge success. A lot of people will only refer back to it for its grotesque moments of, just stupid toilet humor and obscene public incidents, which just, they're there for laughs, and it's great, but it was a great, funny film with a lot of sweetness and charm, but it did have a huge message which really did carry through and cause a lot of talking points, which is the point that Sacha Baron Cohen's trying to go for. He's trying to get people talking about things that they're not paying attention to right now. And with the upcoming election in America, it was the perfect time to be doing a new Borat film. Now, I don't think he really expected things to go the way they did. I really do feel that the point where they do end up dealing with the pandemic was an unexpected... I mean, it was an unexpected U-turn for the world's population in general. But the way the film's seemingly adapted to that situation to create, to help the narrative go still in the same direction, but on a different route, was absolutely genius. And what Sacha Baron Cohen's done here, he's used a few other disguises to ensure that the popularity of Borat doesn't dominate the film and stop him from being able to achieve the things he needs to achieve. And one of the things he's done in this film, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, was the introduction of his daughter. Now, I say daughter. It's not obviously the director's daughter, but there's an actress, Maria Bakalova, plays his daughter Tutar in this film, and basically, she's supposed to be the gift that he's giving to the American government in order to, improve relations with Kazakhstan. Now, in the trailer, you do see her talking every now and again, and you do get the impression that she's going to be a big part of the film. But Tutar, or played by Maria, dominates the film. In fact, she steals this film from under Sacha Baron Cohen's very big face. I was going to say his chin, but so I just looked suddenly to my right to a picture of him on my laptop screen, and I'm like, he does have a big face, doesn't he? But anyway, it's the role she plays, and it's the ability she has to go where she's people are unsuspecting of her motives, and she is therefore able to do things that Borat couldn't do. She can expose women as much as Borat is exposing men, and putting their conservative ideals under a microscope. And she's able to use this disguise of being like sort of the naive girl from a backwards country that doesn't quite understand things. And what she does is she allows people to explain the world as they see it and the way they feel it should be. So they're able to impress upon her their beliefs and their, political ideals and sociological and religious ideals in a way that they feel is presenting a very fair and, appealing way of life. And I think that's the problem with a lot of conservatives, especially religious conservatives in America and England, is they feel that their way of life is pure and, brilliant, and that by telling people from other countries, from like third world countries and from Middle Eastern countries where the culture is so vastly different, that what they see as the right way of living life is, they're benefiting these people by sharing these ideas. But they're ignorant to the idea that they might be somewhat patronizing or condescending to entire nations and entire historical, backgrounds. So you do see a lot of this in the film. You do see a lot of people coming out and like sort of saying things on camera, which you think to yourself, like, if they're not actors, they are never going to recover from this. And there are some real amazingly shocking moments, which, Sacha Baron Cohen is fantastic for getting people to do. There is one bit where, about this controversy in America where certain people who make cakes have refused to make cakes for same-sex weddings, cakes that, promote that kind of, the LGBTQ side of things. And there's been a lot of controversy where they've been saying that it's their right and it's their religious freedom to deny people service based on their sexual preference. So it was very, very, very interesting to see Borat at one point go into a bakery, and right there on camera, he asked for a chocolate cake, and he asked them to personalize it. And the lady quite happily writes in icing, "The Jews will not replace us." She actually just fucking writes it, and then adds a couple of smiley faces. Holy fuck. And there's things like that throughout the film where you're just like, oh fuck. You're famous now for being that person. Congratulations. As we saw from the first film, with those frat boys on the bus who started saying a load of really, really ignorant things regarding slavery and races. They tried to sue, but really they couldn't do anything because they were representing their own point of view and they were saying it in their own words. Sacha Baron Cohen gets accused of trying to entrap people and try to manufacture situations which make people look bad. But really, all he ever does is get them to show their true colours. Now, he usually is in disguise, and he usually, baits them by representing something which they personally don't agree with. When he did the Ali G thing to begin with in the UK, a lot of people felt really uncomfortable around someone that they saw was of like working class, racially ambiguous, and maybe indulged in a lifestyle which they would not agree with. And so it brought out that side of them in the interviews, which made them respond in a way which they probably wouldn't have done with someone if they were just in... Like if Sacha had turned up in a suit and he was asking these same questions in a very polite manner, they would probably give more levelled answers back to him to ensure that they save face. But what he's really doing is making people feel like they're above him and that they can talk down to him. And that's when they really show who they are. Worked great with Ali G, as I say, in this country for the whole classist thing. But when he decided to play what would be interpreted as like sort of a backwards Middle Eastern character from a culture that, even he exaggerated how backwards it was. What he's done there is he's really shown some of these Americans for what they really are. And I'm not saying it's an American-only trait. It's something that's suffered around the world. This whole, right-wing religious point of view. It's very... And I'm not saying as well that religion is a bad thing, but it's just the way it gets used, the way it's weaponized in order to perpetuate certain ideals to the detriment of certain demographics. That's the huge problem that I have with that kind of community. And so I thoroughly enjoyed this film because not only does it really do a fantastically, incredibly clever job of addressing those issues and exposing those kind of people, but it also manages to have that levity, that humour, that kind of gross out fun that we really enjoy from these films. And it also has that sweetness and that heart to it. Sacha Baron Cohen's very clever at bringing in peripheral characters that, like the ones that end up being portrayed in a very negative way, he also manages to find people that he can portray in a very, very positive way. And he does the exact same thing with them. He shares the exact same views in the exact same medium, and the response he gets back is a more liberal, compassionate, considerate, dare I say it, more Christian perspective, where it's all about turning the other cheek and helping those who need the help the most, and being true to yourself and being honest and sincere about your own principles and standing up for them and believing that you are a person of value and having rights. Something that the Tutor character is able to really kind of bring out of people. And really, Maria Bakalova, I'm trying not to say that too fast because I know I'm going to say balaclava. Maria Bakalova is absolutely fantastic. She really does stand out in this film, and she has some moments where you just think to yourself, wow. I'm sure even Sasha was there looking at her at certain points thinking, wow, because she knocks it out of the park. She does such a fantastic job. Give that a look. It's on Amazon now. It's been released exclusively. That's not behind any other paywall or anything like that. If you've got Amazon Prime, you can watch it right now for free. So do that, because I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. Absolutely, 100%. Now, our next film, Juliet Naked, is a film based on the Nick Hornby book of the same name, and it tells the story of Annie, played by Rosie Byrne, the long-suffering girlfriend of Duncan, played by Chris O'Dowd, who is completely obsessed with the acclaimed yet mysteriously reclusive rock star Tucker Crowe. Annie is just about at her wit's end with her job as the creator of a very small and unpopular museum. But whilst contemplating her future, her boyfriend reveals a huge secret that all but destroys their relationship. And with the catalyst of terrible events being the arrival of a very rare acoustic version of his favourite musician, Annie decides to post a harsh and unpopular opinion of this new album online. Achieving the desired effect of upsetting his fans, Annie is a little shocked to receive an acknowledgement from the real Tucker Crowe, played by Ethan Hawke, who praises her honesty. Suddenly, a most unexpected friendship builds between two people from different worlds who might have found each other. Well, they might have found in each other what they never realised they wanted in life. But what will Duncan have to say about the fact that his ex is now hosting his hero, and he's not invited? Now, this one I kind of watched by chance. I hadn't really heard anything about it. But once I realised it was based on a Nick Hornby book. If you're not aware, Nick Hornby books have been turned into loads of different films. The most famous, I think, being High Fidelity, which had John Cusack and Jack Black in, I think, one of his very first ever big film roles. There's also been About a Boy, which had Hugh Grant and Nicholas Hoult in one of his very first acting roles. Oh, seems to be a trend here. Now, Nick Hornby's books, they're very, very popular in this country, and they seem to have this kind of light-hearted, very minimalist, simple kind of plots, which involve some very wonderfully colourful characters who are extremely grounded and relatable. Just going through some everyday but significant encounters. And this is a perfect example of it as well. Everything about the story just screams Nick Hornby. The way that the relationships develop and how even the most dramatic people that walk into people's lives are themselves very ordinary and very plain. And what this really does is it sheds a light on people's obsession with not only their hobbies and their the things that they enjoy in life, but also how they're obsessed with their ego, and how their own tastes, how their own desires in life kind of dictate who they respect and desire as a result. And in this one, we find the character of Duncan is his head's turned by those that think like him, and he forgets how much he actually has in common with his long-suffering girlfriend, and the amount that she endures and actually puts up with. He's very quick to forget all of it when it comes to the fact that she doesn't have the same appreciation for this guy's music that he does. For him, it's everything. For her, it's just something. And that conflict is something that he can't get past. Even though beyond it, they have what is deemed a very successful and enviable relationship. And the problem is, he's so entrenched in this obsession with this artist. Like he has like chat groups online and forums and websites that he constantly indulges in conversation regarding this, that when she defies him in the worst possible way, and it's a justified retaliation, when she goes on having exclusively heard this CD before anyone else and slates it online, he feels like it's the ultimate betrayal for him. Before he's even heard it, his mind is made up that he's going to be the one who best articulates the praise for this most revered artist. Yet what he forgets is that, he actually has an opinion, and he doesn't necessarily have to like all of the things that come from a place that he's so used to finding joy and happiness from. Like, for example, I love the Foo Fighters. They are my favourite band of all time. I've been to see them a dozen times. I've got everything they've ever released and some stuff they haven't released. That's how big a fan I am. I literally have albums worth of stuff that has never been released to the public. So, that's, I understand that kind of obsession with it. However, there are times when I will hear a Foo Fighters track, like the last album, for example. I heard back and I thought, I'm not a big fan. And I feel like, with Foo Fighters fans, that might be sacrilege. That they might turn against me and they might, see me as not being as big a fan as I make myself out to be. I still think they're the best band in the world right now. However, there are tracks on their new album that I just skip. And there have been albums in the past where I've just been like, I'll just play the songs I like. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. If you're 100% satisfied with everything a certain artist does, then your appreciation isn't for their art. It's an infatuation with them as a person. And what we have in this story is Duncan doesn't really understand that what he has is an infatuation. So when his partner puts out this terrible review, he feels like he's been stabbed in the back. And his actions after that aren't really, they don't make the situation any better. Let's put it that way. But because Annie has given an honest and frank opinion, when this rock star who's been secretly watching these people talk about how great he is, when he sees the first honest review he's ever seen for some of his stuff, he's so excited by it that he reaches out and he tries to connect with this person. And what they realize is that what they connect over is not necessarily their opinions of music, but just their opinions in general. And as two human beings, their ability to see the world for what it really is and not for what their ego tells them it is, what they actually find in each other is this honesty and connection, like a real sincere connection that they just couldn't find anywhere else. And that draws them together so strongly that everything else around them doesn't seem as big a problem anymore. The problem she has with Duncan don't seem like a big deal anymore. The boringness of her job at the museum doesn't seem like a big problem anymore. She's gained perspective through this new relationship. And so is he. He's able to see himself as not this washed-up musician anymore. Like, he's a father. And that's a huge, huge thing to achieve in life. That's one of the biggest roles that you can play in anyone's life, regardless of how much your fans may adore you. If your family loves you, your family comes first. I say if your family loves you. I'm kind of painting a picture there that I might not be loved by my family. I'm sure they do. Although, I was supposed to have a plate made for me at a roast dinner today. I didn't get it. So, fine. That's fine. I'm not upset at all. I'll eat my steak by myself. That's fine. But yeah, so what we find in this film is just a very, very sweet and charming story about people with a genuine connection that would never have really found each other if it wasn't for the mistakes made by others who, ironically, would have desired this encounter or this connection more than anyone. Sometimes you find exactly what you're looking for in the last place you'd ever think of looking. That's the story of this film, and it's absolutely worth a look. It's on Netflix. It's wonderful, and it's a real heartwarming film as well. Chris O'Dowd's fantastic. He's brilliant in everything, and Rosie Byrne gives an amazing performance. She's absolutely spot on. And Ethan Hawke, I know we talked about him last week in Predestination. He's one of those actors that has this, like he can carry any character. He doesn't overstate anything. In fact, his understatement of his characters is what usually brings them, grounds them in reality and makes them so identifiable. You gain a lot of empathy for his character, even though you've got absolutely nothing in common with him. And he shows a certain amount of vulnerability that makes him seem less of a rock star and more of a man who just found himself in a world that he never expected. And I think, I think he gives a fantastic performance. All of them do. And it's a wonderful film. I'm thinking I'm going to have to buy some more Nick Hornby books because I do love reading his stuff as well. I think one of my favourite books is one of the short ones, Long Way Down, which is a wonderful, interesting, quirky little story, which did end up getting made into a film with Aaron Paul. And maybe Hugh Grant, was he in it as well? I can't remember. I just remember Aaron Paul being in it. It was a good film. I quite enjoyed that. But yeah, check it out. It's on Netflix. And it's a good one. It's a very easy film to watch with the family. There might be some language in it, so maybe not with the kids. But if you're settling down with your significant other and you just want to sit there and watch a film, give it a go. It's a nice romantic comedy. And I don't really go for rom-coms too much, but this one bucks the trend slightly. So I definitely think it's worth a watch. Okay, moving on to our last film. And I've gone with a British film, an independent film, an indie film, and a hidden gem. It's a real box ticker, this one. And it's not really something that we've really touched on too much on this podcast before, because British culture, when you live in it, you don't necessarily look for it in movies, because movies are supposed to be about escapism. And the last thing I want to see is like a film that depicts the kind of life that I lead, or from the kind of neighborhoods that I'm from, and the kind of things that I go through. Now, I know what you're thinking. Judging by my accent and the way I talk, you're probably thinking, all right, so you come from a good home, probably went to university, maybe have a trust fund, rah, 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 rah. Actually, no. I came from quite a poor background. In fact, there was a time when, my mum, my sister and I were technically between homes. Technically. We were never in the street, but, I've come from nothing. I'm not saying that I've come from nothing and now I've got everything. I still have nothing. But I'm a bit more possessive about it now. It's a bit like the whole C6 Steve album. I started out with nothing and I've still got most of it left. So when I say I identify with like some real kind of working class films about, the hardships of living in a tough neighborhood, and and the kind of gang warfare and stuff that goes on. I may not sound like the kind of person that can identify with that kind of thing, but I am from that part of southwest London. Although this next film takes part in southeast London. But yeah, I'm gonna say it. All right, I'll say it. I've seen some shit. Not good shit, bad shit. I've witnessed shootings, and I've seen my neighbours get raided by riot squads. I've seen people, like, full gang fights where people have their heads caved in with a brick, and it's just, when you come from that kind of background, you're either inspired to be a part of it, or you're inspired to get as far away from it as possible. I've tried to go down the latter route. I've tried to, give myself every opportunity I can to improve myself. And it kind of led me down this weird road for a while where I ended up working for the government in accounts. Sat at a desk every day wearing a tie. And it was all, I was aiming for betterment. I was aiming to kind of create a future for myself that would ensure that I didn't end up repeating, if I did have a family, repeating the same things that my parents went through. My mum did everything she could to make sure that, me and my sister were given every opportunity to live a better life than she had. And, that's one of the things that kind of dawned on me when I suddenly had an opportunity to work in film. I remembered as a kid, my dream and my desire was to become an actor. And whilst, there was a lot of crime and drugs when I was growing up, and, you'd be hanging out with kids at the weekend that were joyriding or like breaking and entering or just shoplifting, and the peer pressure is huge in regards to enticing you into that world. And I did remember having a conversation with a friend of mine shortly before he died, actually, how he noticed that I was one of the only people from our housing estate that hadn't been to jail, didn't have an illegitimate kid somewhere, and had never tried heroin. And he pointed out those three things to me like, it's remarkable that you haven't done those. And I was gobsmacked, really, because if I'd achieved any of those three things, it would have been a huge disappointment to my mum, who'd struggled so much to just make sure that we stayed on the straight and narrow. But it was kind of strange that whereas I felt that I'd kind of left people behind, and maybe, in a way that had upset or insulted them, they'd gone down that path. They'd fallen into those traps. And for some of my friends, it actually cost them their lives. I've been to a lot of funerals for friends, unfortunately, throughout the years. And so when I started watching this film that I'm about to review now, it spoke to me in ways that if you saw me, if you met me, you wouldn't understand how I identified with this film. Blue Story is the story of two friends united by friendship, divided by postcode. Written, directed, and narrated by Andrew Onwubuola, aka Rapman, this is the story of two lads, Marco and Timmy, who, despite being best friends, are dragged into the gang between the Peckham Boys and the Ghetto Boys. Having enjoyed a strong friendship for most of their lives, when Marco is badly hurt in an attack by friends of his best friend Timmy, he blames him for not having his back. Tensions rise, and Timmy leaves Marco with a black eye to add to his injuries. But the level of insult Marco feels, something fueled by his brother, his older brother's rhetoric, who claims to run Peckham, he attacks Timmy in retaliation. When this ends in more tragedy than planned, the two become locked in a game of cat and mouse, which will push both lads to do whatever it takes to ensure they get revenge. But, as they say, those who seek revenge should dig 2 graves. Now this is a very powerful film because Rapman wrote this based on his own experiences of growing up in Peckham and being put in a school which kind of crossed certain lines as far as like the gangs are concerned. And if you ever know what it's like to be in one of those postcode battles, you know where that line is. Like sometimes, I've even seen it in the past, it's a physical line. Like people actually go out there every morning and make sure there's fresh chalk so you know you don't step across that line. Or if you do, you get hurt. Or someone you know gets hurt. All your boys get hurt. There's this, very short fuse with these kind of this kind of gang warfare, which is only fueled by the fact that the working classes are treated worse and worse as time goes on. The poverty increases in this country every year, whilst the wealth gap increases in a very coincidental fashion. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And when you put people into a poor neighborhood where they're surrounded by desperation, where they don't feel like they're betraying public trust by committing crime because they don't feel that the world they're in, they're not supported by the government, they're not respected by society or their community, they're not respected by the police or the emergency services. Communities like this end up feeling isolated. And when you feel isolated, you feel very possessive over what you actually have. Because when you have very little, you will kill to ensure that what you have is still yours at the end of the day. And that kind of desperation and that kind of frailty in a community causes certain unrest, especially when you have another community nearby suffering the same kind of desperation, and they're turning to the same kind of crime solutions like drugs and shoplifting and bootlegging and all that kind of jazz. So it becomes a territorial thing. We don't have much, but if they're going to come here and take what we have, then we're going to make sure that they don't get it very easy. Now, there is a lot of gun crime in this film, and whilst it is a problem in this country, guns aren't a huge thing in this country. They are a problem, but it's not like everyone open carries. It's not like people will ride around with a shotgun in the back of their pickup truck. It doesn't really work like that. People don't have concealed weapon licenses. You can't really carry weapons around with you. So it's quite shocking to see guns being used. But this is a very realistic depiction of how guns do manage to get on the streets in the UK, and how devastating they can be. As I say, I've witnessed shootings. I've witnessed something happening to neighbours with 2 lads that shot the whole place up, and I saw the whole thing happen. So it is a reality that these communities and these neighbourhoods are experiencing. But what they show in this film is that how futile it really is, and how this self-perpetuating hatred between people who are literally on the same side as far as society is concerned, but how this territorial nature can lead to people doing things that they would never ever dream of doing. And sometimes even these loyalties, they're so entrenched in the upbringing of these young lads that when it comes to your best friend, if he lives in a certain postcode and you've got to do something about it, then you will do something about it. And it does lead to some very, very terrible tragedies. But unfortunately, there is not enough support being given to these communities that they can actually work their way out of these problems and, create a better lives for themselves. It's this circle of poverty and punishment, which is experienced by the working class people of this country so badly that it just continues this cycle of violence and pain and hardship. And it's really, really difficult for these people to work their way out of it. Even if you end up going to a good school, society is a huge influencer over what you do with your life. And as I say, having been brought up in an area where crime was the norm, it was how people survived, and having witnessed some terrible things, gang violence, the tragedy of drugs and how it can tear lives apart, and just what people will do when they're starving and desperate and have nothing left to lose. So I was really kind of taken aback by just how good this film was depicting this kind of life, without glamorizing it, without saying oh yeah, this guy's the cool guy because he's got a gun, or this guy's the cool guy because he sells coke. This guy's the cool guy because he's got a secondhand BMW. It's one of those things where the futility of violence and the void left by focusing on materialism. It's a weird situation to be in when you don't know any better, because you don't know how to break free of the cycle. Society's not offering you an option. And when you come from this kind of background, you are kind of pigeonholed. I remember some early days of moving to the home counties, which is where I lost my Irish/Cockney accent. I kind of realised that to get ahead, I would need to become something else. I'd need to evolve into something else. So I found myself distancing myself a lot from my childhood friends, and trying to associate with people who weren't caught up in this whole cycle. And I do have regrets from that time of my life, because I do feel like sort of I walked away from people who I grew up with that I truly loved in my heart. But I knew that the life that we were all a part of was going to end up ruining us. And some of those friends I've walked away from, I've been to the funerals of. So I know that what I did was right. But it's just, you never forget where you come from. And you've always got to try to respect, that where you came from made you who you are. Even if it was the bad things that put you on the right path, you need to respect that that's who you are and that's where you come from. And with these boys in this film, they're torn because their friendships are so important. But they are who they are, and they are from where they're from. And so they end up doing things that they don't want to do, and things that don't end up benefiting them in any way, shape or form. But society has put so much pressure on them to have some kind of integrity in some way. And if they can't get it through, the kind of means that maybe some better off people would be able to, then they're gonna take that respect. They're gonna take that integrity. They're gonna take that, power, even if it's just small time. I'm maybe not doing a great job of just describing this. I'm getting a bit caught up in sociological interpretations of the movie's intentions and how it wants to be received. But it was a fantastic film. And let me say as well, fantastic performances throughout. I didn't recognise a single actor in this, apart from one woman who I know from working on Holby. She also played the Doctor at one point as well. So yeah, check it out. It's on Sky Movies now. Blue Story. It's a fantastic film, and it's just a wonderful depiction of, what life's like in some of the most financially deprived areas of the country. especially in the capital as well. You want to hear things about London that's all kind of la-di-da and bowler hats and, the Queen and corgis and beefeaters and the bridge and all that jazz. You really want to know what London's like, what the real working class people of London are going through. Blue Story will give you a pretty fair idea of what it's like. But yeah, as I say, it's on Sky Movies now. It's a fantastic film. I really enjoyed it. I found it extremely compelling. And it's quite a tragic tale. It doesn't glamorize anything. There are no heroes in this story. There are just real people having to deal with life as best they can with the hand they've been dealt. And that's it. That is it for this week. It's a bit of a late one this week. It's probably not that late, actually, but because it's getting so dark so quickly. Remember, the clocks went back last night. It feels like it's middle of the night right now. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that you guys are coming and listening every week. I'm still working on improving the show, as I've talked about before. There is plans that we're going to possibly reboot it. The idea now is that it'll become not just a movie podcast, but movie and TV, and I might alternate week by week, movies one week, TV shows the next week. There is the thought of actually doing an additional episode, so 2 a week. I don't know, that seems a bit much, seeing as I'm very difficult to actually pin me down and actually get me doing some work, but yeah. That's all I have for you this week. Kind of dragged on a little bit, but I've had some points to make. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for continuing to support the show and keep listening to the podcast. Do share it with your friends, because we are available absolutely everywhere. I'm even putting this up on YouTube now as well. But, we're on Deezer, we're on Apple and iTunes. So that's all of the Apple money that I'm not getting any of. But we're also on Amazon Music now as well. We're on Spotify. We're on every single podcast app you can possibly think of, including iHeartRadio. You can get us on in your Alexa now. So if you've got one of those in your house, just simply ask it to play the following feature podcast and you will get exactly that. But yeah, do please share this as much as you can. Do try to tell a friend about the podcast, because it would really help. And let's see what happens. If you've got any suggestions or anything you'd like the podcast to be doing that it's not currently doing, or more of what it is doing, let me know. But yeah, for now, until next week, I wish you peace, love and empathy. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, enjoy your week, and enjoy your movies. Take care.